A large storm will be coming to the United States today and tomorrow, and this is going to pose a threat for some significant severe weather, including damaging winds, large hail, and a few tornadoes from the Midwest and the Ohio Valley all the way back into the Northeast. So in today's forecast, we're going to break down this severe weather event for you in detail, in addition to why we could see another tropical storm develop in the Gulf of Mexico as we go throughout the weekend. Now, let's begin with what's happening right now across the United States to kind of give you an idea of what's actually happening in terms of the weather pattern. And right now we have a large scale high pressure system that's been actually retreating back to the west over the last several days, and what this has allowed for is a band of moisture to basically go from Arizona and New Mexico all the way back into areas like the Midwest. And this is why we are seeing showers and thunderstorms all the way across this really large and elongated area, anywhere again from Arizona back even into New England. Now, this has also allowed for significant flash flooding. Notice the massive complexes of storms earlier this morning back over in Minnesota and Iowa. This did prompt a ton of flash flood warnings overnight, so hopefully everybody's staying safe over there. Turn around, don't drown if you're on the roadways, as several inches of rain have fallen in extreme southern Minnesota back into Iowa, Nebraska, and South Dakota. In addition to that, we had some flash flood emergencies back over New Mexico yesterday, and that is due to the fact of all the rain that we've been seeing. It is abnormal for this time of year, especially for New Mexico, to see as much rain as they've been seeing. Also, we are watching a spinning area of low pressure back over in the Gulf of Mexico. This could be our next tropical storm, and we'll talk a little bit more about this later in the forecast. Right now, this is expected to move west towards Mexico and very far southern Texas, where some showers, storms, and perhaps even a tropical storm will develop over the weekend and into early next week. And there's also another little spinny area back over in Georgia this morning, and that is also something that was Invest 92L. It did not develop into a tropical storm, and it is not expected to become a tropical storm over the next couple of days. Today's severe weather risk is going to be across parts of the Midwest, including the Great Lakes region like Michigan, where there will be a potential for damaging winds and large hail. And notice that there is a slight risk for severe weather across a pretty large area where the greatest concern for damaging winds will be. I would not be surprised if we do end up with a small enhanced risk for either the potential for damaging winds or even maybe the potential for tornadoes. Now, that remains uncertain right now. We'll talk more about that here in a second. Here's what we're looking at in terms of the wind risk for today. So again, mainly across the Midwest and the northern Ohio Valley. We also have 1, 2, and 3 other areas that we're watching for some isolated severe weather today. Mostly just going to be an isolated wind threat. Now, the tornado risk for today, as I mentioned before, is going to be more elevated. We will have the potential for a few tornadoes in 2 different areas where the greatest concentration, I think, will be for this tornado risk. One of which will be in southern Wisconsin, extreme northern Illinois, and eastern Iowa, where the potential for a couple of tornadoes will exist. We also could see an isolated tornado outside of this, anywhere from about Chicago back into parts of very far southern parts of central Wisconsin. We also have another 5% tornado risk over in central Michigan, where again another concentration for an isolated tornado or two will exist today. Now, I do want to mention today's tornado risk again is not super high, but it is definitely increasing from what we saw yesterday. So make sure that you have a tornado action plan in place and have multiple ways to receive alerts, and make sure that you have a weather radio handy. If you don't have a weather radio handy, you can pick up a Midland weather radio that you can go check that out with the link in the description down below and get 10% off on one with the code WELCOME10. Also, going into Sunday, we are going to have another risk for severe weather across the Northeast, where more tornadoes will be a possibility. The good news is that the tornado risk is really only going to be up in here, back over in parts of New England, where there will be a potential for a few tornadoes. Back down here to the south is what I mean by the good news. You're not going to really be under a risk for any sort of tornadic activity, but damaging winds will be a possibility across this entire area. The highest tornado risk is going to be across parts of Vermont, New Hampshire, New York, and Massachusetts. There's also a small 2% tornado risk anywhere from Pennsylvania, New York, back into Maine. We also might be live on tomorrow, so make sure that you're subscribed to the channel in case we do go live tomorrow. Let's talk a little bit more about the Midwest severe weather for today. These are the tornado parameter values, and it'll kind of give you a better idea of where the greatest threat for tornadoes will reside today. This is right around lunchtime, so we will start to have some increasing low-level shear across both parts of eastern Iowa and into southern Wisconsin, in addition to Michigan. But I don't think this tornado risk will really get going until at least about 2 or 3 o'clock this afternoon, especially across parts of the Midwest, including northeastern and eastern Iowa, and back into southern Wisconsin, where the potential for a couple or even a few few tornadoes will be a possibility. One interesting thing I do want to note is that NATOcast, which is an experimental tool that kind of gives us an idea of where the greatest tornado risk might be, they actually did represent this area under a 10% tornado risk, like the Storm Prediction Center sort of guide. Now, the Storm Prediction Center did not issue a 10% tornado risk. I'm just giving you an idea that this area in particular will have the best chance, I think, for tornadoes today. Once we get closer to 4 to 5 o'clock, the greatest tornado risk will be right around there in southwestern Wisconsin in a very narrow corridor. But again, we could see tornadoes anywhere outside of this, so just make sure that you're staying very weather aware and vigilant. But that greatest corridor will probably be here in northeastern Iowa and back into southern Wisconsin, and maybe a small hair there of northern Illinois. By tonight, this tornado risk starts to die down a little bit, but we will still have at least a very low tornado risk a little bit after sunset. But I think the greatest concern, honestly, will be during the afternoon, early evening. After that, I think things will calm down. So luckily, the majority of this threat will not be nocturnal. Now, for many of you guys that watch these forecasts every single day, you know that we usually use a regional radar to show you what it looks like across these areas. We're actually going to go ahead and dive into the localized areas and give you a more detailed breakdown, because I think today's severe weather event does require that, since I do think it's going to be a bit more significant, and hence why we're going to be going live today. So make sure that you're subscribed to the channel. Here's what it looks like this morning across Iowa. So we're going to begin with Iowa, go west to east. Storms will be ongoing this morning, but majority of these storms should move out around lunchtime. And honestly, this should be enough to be able to give a lot more of instability across areas like Iowa, basically making this environment more unstable. So severe weather should start to ramp up right around 2 to 3 o'clock central time. Notice storms really ramp up in southern Minnesota, back across parts of central and northern Iowa, where damaging winds will be the primary concern initially, but tornadoes will try to start to ramp up, especially in northeastern Iowa, right around 4 to 5 o'clock. By 5, these storms are moving east. Any storms that can stay discreet out in front of the line will have the best chance at producing a tornado. So definitely make sure that you're staying weather aware. By 6 to 7, these storms continue to move east. Areas like Iowa City and Davenport will be hit right around 6, 7, 8 o'clock tonight. And eventually by 8 to 9 o'clock, these storms are moving out. Again, the main concern today will be damaging winds, but the chance for a couple or even a few tornadoes will be a possibility. Wisconsin is going to be rainy all morning, so really this environment will be pretty stable as we go into the afternoon, but we should have a recovering air mass where we will eventually start to see some storms fire off. So right around 4 to 5 o'clock, storms are moving into southwestern Wisconsin. Again, these storms will be the most capable, I think, of producing tornadoes. By 6 to 7, these storms are moving towards Madison, Janesville, West Bend, and Milwaukee. Eventually by 8 to 9, they're moving into the Great Lakes, and then eventually Wisconsin is done after 8 or 9 o'clock tonight. Here's what it looks like in the Midwest, including Illinois, Indiana, and southern Michigan for today. Storms will start to ramp up later this evening, so right around 5, 6, 7 o'clock is when storms will move into parts of northwestern Illinois, with mostly a wind threat, but an isolated tornado will be possible. By 9 to 10 o'clock, these storms are moving into Chicago suburbs, where damaging winds again is the main concern. By 11 to 12 o'clock, these storms continue to move into central Illinois, northern Indiana, and southern Michigan, and notice how this line of storms just falls apart. So overall, the main concern, I think, for most of Illinois and almost all of Indiana, and even into parts of northwestern Ohio, will be a wind threat, but we could end up seeing maybe a brief spin up if you're in northern Illinois. Elsewhere, I don't think we're seeing tornadoes. And back over in Michigan for today, the main concern will come this afternoon. We'll be watching for storm development right around 2 to 3 o'clock right across central Michigan. The concern really is going to reside with any storms, again, that are discrete. It is questionable, though, whether this threat really gets going. It is a bit more conditional, but if any storms can fire up, like the HRRR model showing here northeast of Saginaw, we could end up seeing a tornado, which again could even be a bit more on the strong side of things if it gets going. But overall, again, that concern is still on the low side of things. By 5 to 6 o'clock, storms are still trying to get going across central Michigan, and then as we go later into the evening, storms are mostly going to be wind producers. We could get another isolated tornado risk around midnight in central Michigan, but I think it'll be predominantly a wind threat. So again, no reason to be panicking. Just make sure that you are staying weather aware, as there is a chance for tornadoes today. Back over in the Northeast, we'll have a very conditional, very low tornado risk later today. It's going to be predominantly wind, though, across parts of New York and Pennsylvania. Once we go into tomorrow, we're going to eventually see a tornado risk really start to spike up across the Northeast, including New England, where some tornado parameter values really jump in eastern New York, meaning that the tornado risk should be on the bit of the higher side of things, especially for New England standards, as we go into the afternoon hours tomorrow. So the timing for today, some storms will move across New York and Pennsylvania this morning. This should be really the only round of storms that we do see today. Eventually this evening, maybe another round of storms gets going, as long as the atmosphere can recover. If it does, we'll see another round, but if not, it's going to just be one round of storms this this morning. If this does happen, the main concern will again be damaging winds. If this does also happen, we might see an upgrade to a slight risk. Once we go into tomorrow morning, storms will be ongoing across a large chunk of New England, but a lot of these will just be, again, showers and isolated rumbles of thunder. Nothing severe during the morning. By the afternoon, storms start to fire up back over here in New York, where the main concern initially will be wind. Any storms that can stay discreet will produce an elevated chance at a tornado or two in both Vermont and New Hampshire. And eventually, as we go into the evening hours, those storms continue to move west to east across parts of Vermont and New Hampshire, where the potential again for a tornado or two will exist and damaging winds. Here's a quick update on the tropics. We still have two areas of development. One already crashed into Georgia and Florida, whereas a very close to zero chance of developing into anything other just some showers for today. And also back in the southwestern Gulf, still a medium chance of development back over there, where a tropical storm may develop, and if it does, it'll crash into Mexico. Very similar to Alberto, but I don't think it'll be as bad, at least for Texas. But there could be some, minimal storm surge, maybe some coastal flooding as well. So stay weather aware there. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to hit the like button down below and subscribe if you've not already.